So these are some of I don't know if we want to call them steps, but these are the key criteria that you will complete when working on a risk assessment. You're going to identify your mission objectives. You're going to identify your risks to meeting those objectives. You're going to identify the inherent risk associated with that particular risk. You're going to identify your current controls that you have in place, and then the resulting residual risk. And then based on that residual risk, if the residual risk is still not where you want it to be, if it's still higher than you would like, if it's a 3 and you want it to be a 1, then you might identify additional controls that are either in place or that you want to be in place to further reduce that risk rating. And so and then also just prioritizing based on all those ratings, prioritizing the risks so that you're able to focus in the right areas. So next slide. Okay, so the first couple columns of the slide, you've got your risk number, you're identifying your mission objectives, you've got your risk description, and then that risk category that we talked about, whether it's cyber, data, improper pay, operational, reputational, strategic, all that. So moving on to the next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about a good risk statement and what would be included in a good risk statement. Each risk description should include a condition or cause, the potential event, and the impact that it would have on mission. Including these 3 elements of a complete risk description will allow an external party to easily identify your risk and its impacts. And a lot of times where we see where a lot of the comments and feedback that we provide are related to not understanding the overall impact to the organization, being able to clearly communicate to management, what does this mean? If this were to happen, what would it mean for our organization and how would it impact our mission? So our first example here, we've got sensitive information is included as part of the financial information presented to the auditor, which may increase the risk of disclosing information that is critical to national security. So the way that risk can be rewritten to better highlight the condition, impact, and potential event is shown as the rewritten risk. The DON may not sufficiently protect its sensitive and critical information to national security. Sensitive and critical information may be inadvertently given to third parties, including auditors, that increases the risk of improper disclosure. So I think that the old risk was basically saying the same thing, but as you can see with the rewritten risk, it's more clear to the average reader what could happen and what that impact would have on the organization. Next slide. Okay, so we've got a couple more examples here. I'm gonna let you guys take a minute to read the old risk, and then we'll go through the rewritten risk, so you guys don't have to just hear me talking the whole time. So just take a minute, read the old risk, and then we'll go through the rewritten risk for the first item. Okay, so for the first one, the rewrite, decentralized procurement process increases the risk that individuals without proper authority approving purchase requests, purchase orders, and certifying invoices. This may lead to inappropriate spending, thereby diverting funds from higher priority requirements impacting readiness. So again, while the first statement is true, the second statement allows the reader to better understand what the impact would be if this area was to occur. All right, so for the next risk, let's talk about lack of controls over commitments. You guys can read that, and then we'll go over the rewritten. So for this one, the rewrite, inaccurate commitments, obligations, de-obligations, undelivered orders, and unfilled customer orders are recorded due to large volume of transactions may lead to misstatements on statement of the SBR balances and errors in managerial reports, which preclude timely identification of resources that could be used for other priorities. So in this particular example, it isn't clear the condition in the first, in the old risk, and now we've indicated a large volume due to a large volume of transactions, which helps better explain how this might happen, or what would create that risk. This will also help you in terms of identifying a control. Understanding the condition or the cause allows you to put a proper control in place to address that potential condition or cause. Next slide. All right, so if you want to read that first risk, the old risk. Okay, so for this one, the Don's construction in progress balances may be inaccurate and unsupported due to poor record keeping, which may result in misstated financial statements, inaccurate readiness reporting, and poor deployment schedule planning. So here, we've improved the condition. It's more clear what could cause the error. We've also improved the impact to the mission, because it isn't just about financial statements. There are operational impacts as well. So ensuring that piece about poor deployment, scheduling, planning is also very important to the mission. All right, and then I believe this is the last one. If you want to read the old risk, and then we'll go through the rewritten one. Okay, and so for this one, the Don may fail accurate record of its contractor-acquired government-furnished property that results in poor accountability and an inability to reconstitute equipment, weapons, components, and operational material at a time of crisis. So basically, the rewritten risk is a lot more clear about what could happen, the condition and the cause, the potential event, and the impact to mission. So while the old risk is okay, the rewritten risk is much more clear and would definitely be a better communication to your management. All right, moving on to the next slide. Okay, so this is another one. I think that the answers are going to be somewhat subjective, but we will go ahead and move into this to this question. Which of these is a good risk description? And we'll let folks take a minute. And so, as I mentioned, if you've already texted Rollins Bruce 474 to 22333, you do not need to do that again. You can just enter your A, B, C, or D into that message chain. Okay, we saw a lot of volatility on that one. I don't know. Are people reading ahead? The answer is C. So if we move back to the other slide with the answers more clear. So the reason was not the right answer. And again, this is all subject to interpretation, and we could talk through these for hours. But we felt that this one was too broad. It needs to be more simple and more clear. For the second one, the impact is not strong. And for the last one, same thing. The impact is not strong in terms of what the actual, what would the impact to the mission be for that one, which is why we went with C, because it contains all of the elements that we're looking for: the condition, the potential event, and the impact all in one. So that's why C is what we picked for the right answer. So we've got one more like this. And this is sort of a callback to those nightmares of SAT days. We've got one of those, please choose the best risk description questions. So all of these are decent risk description questions, but we're looking for y'all to provide us with the best. Okay, I think we're close to. I haven't seen a ton of changes, so we'll go ahead and finalize this one. So it's interesting. Originally, it started out with a lot of people answering C, and we actually chose C as being the correct answer. In terms of A, for this one, it's unclear the issue. And then for D, again, not enough information there to fully understand the risk. So the reason we picked C over B is because B does get into some vague stuff: a lack of internal controls and adequate oversight of payments. Is still kind of high level. It's not clear enough what the condition might be. Whereas C, payments to host nations for services, like, it's very clear what the potential condition is and what the result would be, which is why we picked C over B as the right answer. But again, we said choose the best risk description. We understand that, an argument could potentially be made for each of these on their own. All right, so let's move on to the next part of the template. All right, so the next couple columns of the template address fraud. So this is where if your risk is potentially a risk that could have a fraud element, then you would want to identify your fraud risk type, and then also your fraud risk factors, and more information about about the fraud risk type, the fraud risk factors are included in the implementation guide, and there's going to be a whole training to cover more about fraud later in the process. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this right now. I will just say that even if you pick a different risk category besides fraud, there could still be fraud elements. It's sometimes difficult to choose which risk category you want to pick, and so depending on what you pick, it may not be fraud. But you can certainly still choose a fraud risk type and factor, even if you've chosen something else besides fraud as your risk category.